Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Find Your Model Health, the official podcast for those looking to optimize their long-term health and weight goals. I'm very happy to have you all back with me for another episode, and I know you're going to love the chat that I have lined up for you today. Today, we're talking to Dr. Kozlowski, or Dr. Koz, as he prefers to be called. We're going to look at hormones and detox and whatever else might pop up. So Dr. Koz is a functional medicine practitioner based out of Chicago, Illinois, and he has trained with other well-known leaders in his field that many of you will recognize, like Dr. Mark Hyman and Dr. Deepak Chopra. Dr. Koz specializes in many areas of health, including gut health, hormones, detoxification, and even trauma, and has worked with hundreds of clients over the last 12 years in his career. And Dr. Koz also has a new book coming out in October titled Get the Funk Out, Balance Your Hormones and Detox, which is a really interesting name. So I will have you explain where you came up with these names. But please, everyone, welcome Dr. Koz. It's lovely to have you here with us. So do you want to tell us what got you into health and everything? Like, people always ask you your story, but I just want to know why. Why did you get into all of this?
No, it's an honor to be here, and I'm excited to talk with you and share some of my experience. But I'll try to keep it short with my history. But my parents are both doctors. They're both immigrants from Poland. So I was born in America, first generation. I learned to speak Polish before I learned to speak English. When I was young, I wanted to be a doctor like my parents, but I like to go out and party, and I didn't like going to class on Friday mornings. So I got a degree in economics in college. And when I was a senior, my best friend was diagnosed with lupus and passed away 3 months after her diagnosis, along with 1 week after we graduated. So that's what kind of flipped me to go back into, or to like be like, wow, maybe I should have been a doctor, because I couldn't help her at all. And so I ended up going back to school, to do all the sciences, take the MCAT, go to med school. And I was going to be just a regular family practice doctor. And then I was just randomly introduced to functional medicine. There was a doctor we worked with who would start every patient we admitted to the hospital on a multivitamin and vitamin D. And we thought it was a joke. We always used to make fun of him. Why aren't we prescribing medications? And I talked to him one day and he was like, hey, I'm studying functional medicine. My own story is when I had that conversation with him, I had just taken a 6-week leave to get treatment for alcohol abuse. So I'm a recovering alcoholic, and I went to like a partial inpatient treatment to get help. And that opened my eyes to like alternative modalities. When I was in treatment, we were doing acupuncture and exercise and meditation and all this stuff that I didn't really think did anything, coming from a traditional background. But that opened my eyes, my own health journey. And then I started going to functional medicine conferences, and everything just made sense. Everything was taught from like a physiology, a biological level, anatomy. So I couldn't really argue with any of it. And at the end of the day, I guess my goal getting into medicine was to help people with unexplained diseases like my friend had. And I've been able to help lots of people put something like lupus into remission. So been very lucky and blessed to do that. But that's kind of my brief story of how I got into functional medicine. And the whole point of functional medicine is to figure out the why, right? Instead of focusing on like, oh, I'm tired, here, take this to have more energy. It's why am I tired, and how can I identify that and fix that? So it's very different than I was trained as a regular doctor, but I think it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, so there's more of a focus on the whole it's so cliche with the root cause. What is going on? Like, why
Yeah,
is this happening? Like, really, why is
right.
this happening? It's one thing to say you're tired or sore all the time, but why are you tired and sore? So, firstly, condolences about your friend. That is unfortunate that you weren't in a position to help her at that stage. But you obviously experienced a lot of benefit yourself from going through the alcoholism treatment. Like you mentioned, they had multiple tools to try and introduce you to, and that obviously was a driver towards, you're like, hey, there's more than just pharmaceuticals or diagnoses to fixing and helping people, really.
Absolutely.
So
Um,
you had
uh,
you had great success with your first book, which hopefully we'll chat about another time. But now I'm speaking to you because there's a problem right now, and it could be because it's been exacerbated over the last couple of years with the whole COVID and the lockdown and all. A lot of people having hormone issues now, adrenal, thyroid, sex hormones, loss of libido, all of that. So that's what your new book is about. Do you want
yeah.
to tell me, why did you then transition into hormones? Like, why is that where your focus is right now?
So in functional medicine, I always like to keep things very simple. There are five main areas that I work with people, and they are food, gut health, hormones, environmental toxins, and mental, emotional, and spiritual health. And so those are the basic five areas where I'm doing testing, and usually where we find imbalances that are underlying why someone's sick, right? And my first book, Unfunk Your Gut, was about diet, gut, and mental, emotional, spiritual health. So I really enjoy teaching. So that left me with hormones and toxins.
Okay.
As the other things to explain functional medicine. And I think it's written towards practitioners, and also to patients, obviously. But I think the biggest thing I see, because I also teach doctors with IF that are training in IFM right now, is it's very hard for a traditional doctor to switch their practice to, like, you go to these conferences, you learn all this stuff, and then you get to your office on Monday morning and it's like, what do you do? So that's from the practitioner side. From the patient side, it's like, well, I have all these symptoms of thyroid disease, but my doctor will only test my TSH. And so I just think there's a lot of room for improvement and for a non-biased opinion that doesn't just come from the pharmaceutical industry and doesn't just come from like trying to sell supplements either. So I guess the main reason I wrote about hormones is because that is a major piece. I personally have or had low testosterone. I'd say somewhere between 75 to 100% of women that come to my practice that are premenopausal have estrogen dominance. Thyroid disease is the most common autoimmune disease there is. Adrenal glands are stress glands, and I'm a believer that that's the most important part of health. There's also the pancreas and blood sugar. And really, at the end of the day, the more research that comes out about the people that had problems with COVID, for the most part, it's blood sugar issues. And that's just people that were diagnosed with diabetes or high blood sugar. But there's also pre-diabetes, which I explain in the book, that a lot of people that also probably suffered from COVID had pre-diabetes and didn't even know it. And then in writing about hormones, people always want to know why. Well, why are our hormones so screwed up? Why do men have low T? Why do women have estrogen dominance? Why does everybody have thyroid disease? I believe it's because of our environment. I believe it's because of the toxins that we're being exposed to. And we can get all into detox. And I do in my book, I have a whole chapter on what detox is. And then the main toxins that I work with, which are heavy metals, lead and mercury, probably being the two most common and famous, mold. And then there's all the other non-metal toxins like glyphosate, the main component of Roundup. There's what's in your hair products, your skin products, your sunscreen. what your kid's baby bottle is made out of, the toys that you play with. There's all these chemicals, and there's more and more chemicals being introduced into our environment. And when these chemicals get into our body, they destroy our cells, and their favorite place to destroy is our hormone glands. They love to sit in your thyroid. They love to sit in your adrenal glands, your testes, your ovaries. So there's, in my opinion, a connection between the two. Why are people so hormonally imbalanced now? I believe it's mostly because of the toxic environment that we live in.
You said something just there that gave me an aha moment. And like, we know this stuff, but we don't know it until someone says it. And usually what I like to do with my clients is to translate stuff in an easily digestible way that they can go, oh, okay, like something really simple. And you just said, we all have thyroid issues, but what's the one common denominator? Is the environment. Because you can't say, well, everyone eats apples, or everyone stays up late, or everyone drinks alcohol, because they don't. The one common denominator is going to be our environment. And our environment has been changing, maybe not so in a positive way over the last couple of decades, which is obviously affecting us on every level. So if we go just back a bit, what are the most common hormone imbalances that you see?
Number one is definitely thyroid, and it's usually low thyroid. And usually that's an autoimmune condition, which is called Hashimoto's, which basically means that the immune system has identified your thyroid gland as an invader, and it wants to get rid of it. And it's so the immune system is attacking the thyroid because it sees it as an invader. Why would your thyroid all of a sudden one day look like an invader? Well, what if it was full of toxins, right? What if it's full of glyphosate and lead and mercury, and all this stuff? Well, then wouldn't your immune system be doing the right thing by trying to get rid of it? In my opinion, yes. So thyroid disease, and there's people with low thyroid that don't have Hashimoto's, and it's still not functioning properly. So I would say thyroid disease. I don't see it very often, but I'd say the biggest problem in North America is blood sugar issues, right? With our poor diets, most people are having too much insulin, too much sugar, which leads to too much insulin, and then the insulin stops working. So then you make more, and then all the sugar gets stored in all your cells. So really, probably the biggest hormonal issue we have is blood sugar issues. But most patients that come to me have usually cleaned up their diet, or they're not, that's not who I work with mostly. And then in female, when it comes adrenal glands, I personally think we all, that's another one where we all have some degree of adrenal fatigue. Adrenal fatigue is broken up into stages 1, 2, and 3. Some people call it 4 stages. It's basically the differences is like there's a short-term stress, like, what am I going to eat for dinner tonight, versus like, I was not loved as a child and I have all this trauma and I'm carrying all of that and chronic kind of issues. And so there's cortisol imbalances. When the cortisol is imbalanced, that leads to blood sugar imbalances. And then your blood sugar gets imbalanced, and then you're more susceptible to like COVID. So all of it's connected. With women, estrogen dominance, like I said, is the most common thing I see. With men, low testosterone. In general, usually it's a little bit of everything. A woman might come to me and she looks totally like estrogen dominance is her main issue. But then we test her thyroid, and the thyroid's not working that well. And if the thyroid's not working well, then your female hormones aren't going to work well either. So sometimes you have to start with the thyroid in order to balance out the reproductive hormones. So those are kind of some of the main issues I see are thyroid, adrenal glands, not so much blood sugar, even though that's the most common one. And then with men, testosterone, and women, estrogen, progesterone.
Well, it really is, like you said there, you might see estrogen dominance, but then something else is off: the thyroid, the gallbladder, cholesterol. Because as much as people, I've said this on other interviews, as much as people would like a diagnosis that it's just one thing, It's never. It's your body
Never.
is a whole system. You really can't have one thing without another thing.
Right.
And you mentioned blood sugars, and I was like, oh my gosh, nearly everybody I see has blood sugar issues. Nearly like everyone. I see a lot of low progesterone, and then of course I see a lot of low libido. So low progesterone, low libido, adrenals, and so on. So can you speak a little bit more on the whole, because this is a big topic with my people, adrenals, cortisol. Why are they feeling crap, basically? Why are they feeling this way? What happens?
For me, it usually starts as trauma. And I define trauma as anything less than nurturing. So it could be as simple as when you're 5 years old, your parents don't pay enough attention to you, and that sets off a signal of I'm not good enough. And cortisol is released when we're in fight or flight response, right? That's the sympathetic nervous response, and we're feeling like we're in a life or death situation. And that was, we have our sympathetic nervous system and our parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic is fight or flight. Parasympathetic is rest and digest. And that's how we've survived through evolution is that sometimes we turn on fight or flight, and sometimes we turn on rest and digest. People nowadays are living in fight or flight 24/7, right? We wake up and the first thing we do is check our phone, check our emails, check text, check the breaking news, social media. And right away, we've gotten up, we haven't even eaten, and the mind is telling the gut, we don't need you today, right? And cortisol is being released. Cortisol is one of the two hormones that you don't want too much of. The other one is insulin. And when cortisol is being released, it screws up our blood sugar. It suppresses our immune system. You don't digest as well. Your immune system isn't functioning as well. You can't get a good night's sleep. If you can't get a good night's sleep, then everything is screwed up.
So I just want to stop you. What do you mean the mind tells the gut, hey, I don't need you today?
So there's the gut-brain connection. And so your gut tube, and this is all described in my first book, Unfunk Your Gut, if anyone's curious, but your gut is a tube that starts with the mouth and ends with the anus. There's openings on both ends, and that tube is surrounded by a nervous system called the enteric nervous system. That nervous system has more neurons than your brain does. That nervous system that surrounds your gut and influences how you poop, how you digest, etc., is connected to your brain by something called the vagus nerve. So we have 12 cranial nerves, which are nerves that run all through your head and brain, and some of them go to the body. Cranial nerve number 10 is called your vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is basically a highway of information. It carries signals from the brain to the gut, and it carries signals from the gut to the brain. That vagus nerve runs on your autonomic nervous system, which means automatic. So you don't think about it. When your mind thinks you're in a fight or flight situation, like you wake up and you're reading the news and you're like, holy cow, everything's so screwed up, that shuts down that sends a signal to your heart to, hey, we're in survival mode, so we need lots of blood flow. You need to be pumping. All the energy needs to go to your muscles and brain so you survive, right? What that tells the gut is, hey, don't waste any energy on digesting right now, right? Because if you're running from a lion or a bear or something, you don't want to be expending energy to digest food, right?
Yeah.
You want to be expending energy to survive. And so that's what I mean. There's literally a signal that the brain sends to the gut that either turns it on and it's like, hey, we're in a relaxed state, let's digest our food, or we're in a life or death situation and we need to survive. So we're not going to make stomach acid. We're not going to digest. Our gut's going to get leaky. Our microbiome is going to be affected. So the mind can do all of that to the gut.
So correct me if I'm wrong. Basically, what you're saying is if I wake up in the morning, which I have done several times, and I know I shouldn't, but sometimes you forget to schedule a post or whatever. So I go on my phone immediately my brain goes, alarms, alarms, like it's going to be a stressful day. So that sends off a big alarm throughout my body that says, let's go, let's survive. But hey, digestion is not part of survival, and neither is reproduction if we're going to go there. But that's
And
going to,
neither is detox.
yeah, and that's going to affect as well people who are listening, because I know I try to connect the dots for my people. That's going to affect your bile production, stomach acid, enzymes. What we know goes wrong when you start messing with bile, we've got gallbladder and liver and pancreas issues, and then we've got cholesterol and triglycerides. But I'm saying that specifically because I know a couple of my followers right now are dealing with gallbladder and digestive issues. So I really want them and me to be reminded why we shouldn't be looking at our phone first thing in the morning, even though it's hard. Like, it is hard. We're only human, and we have businesses to run and like kids to get to school. Like, shit, did I forget it was audition day for little Johnny? Let me check my emails. Like, just stuff happens. But maybe the majority of the time we can say, let's not do this until an hour later or whatever.
Yeah, one of the best things I heard at a retreat I was at is like your day should be basically wake up, pee, and meditate. You know, that's not how I start my day usually, being honest. But that.
So yeah, that's not how most people start their days. I mean, it would be nice, but most people are saying, oh yeah, that would be lovely, but I don't have time for that. Like, you don't have time. No matter how early you get up, you just never have enough time. So that's why I will try to say to my clients, you know what, if you don't think you've time for meditation, why don't you do walking meditation instead? Go out for a walk and get some fresh air instead. So back to what we were saying about this whole adrenal issue. If you're just looking at your phone first thing in the morning and you're starting off this kind of spiral of anxiety and cortisol, eventually, if that continues on, that's going to crush your adrenals. Am I correct? Like, there's only so much they can take.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing how resilient they are. I mean, you'll meet people that, you know, have been through so much, and you test their cortisol and it's still okay. But that's kind of when you hit stage 3, or some people call it stage 4 of adrenal fatigue, is when your adrenals kind of just are done. You know, they've been working so hard, making all this cortisol, that they're kind of just like, we can't handle anymore. It's kind of like for someone that their pancreas stops working, they stop making insulin, or the thyroid stops working. Same thing as people, eventually your adrenal glands have had enough.
What are the
and it
signs
presents
of
in
that?
different ways.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be extreme fatigue. That's probably the most common sign. But it could be presenting as anything. I mean, it could shut down your thyroid production. It could present as low thyroid. It could present as migraines or headaches, or just a lot of anxiety or irritability, or fighting with spouse or work, not getting a restful night's sleep, always feeling tired even if you're sleeping. So a lot of the interesting thing to me with hormones, whether you're talking about a low thyroid, or you're talking adrenal glands, or you're talking low progesterone, estrogen dominance, the symptoms can be the same. So that's what I always warn my patients is, like, you know, you really sound like somebody with low thyroid because you have fatigue, you have thinning hair, you have dry skin. But there's a chance, once we get done testing all your hormones, that maybe it's just your adrenal glands, or maybe it's just your estrogen, progesterone, or maybe it's a little bit of all of it. So it's hard. I mean, without testing, to really diagnose it, because the symptoms can really kind of overlap. Like, a low thyroid could present as just irregular periods, or, you know, so it's, the symptoms can really do overlap with the different hormonal imbalances. And so when I really suspect someone has hormonal imbalances, I like to do a lot of testing. And that's one of the things I did in my book, is I provided a lot of charts that have what labs I would order, and then also how to interpret the labs, because I can't tell you how many people I've worked with that have every symptom of a low thyroid, and they've been going to their doctor year after year, and the only test that the doctor will do is their TSH levels. And we can talk about the problem with that. I go into it very thoroughly, but to me, a problem, you know, a TSH is not enough. We need to look at free T4 levels. We need to look at free T3 levels, thyroid antibodies. Some people look at reverse T3. But when I do a full panel right away, I see that they're low thyroid. And you know, they are kind of devastated because they're like, well, I've been going to my doctor for 7 years and they keep saying that my TSH is fine. Well, all TSH is a signal from the brain to the thyroid to make thyroid hormone. So the analogy I really like is it's like the heat in your house. And so your thermostat is your pituitary gland and your thyroid is the heater. And so your thermostat sets a temperature, right? Let's say it's 70 degrees. And if the temperature drops below that, the thermostat sends a signal to the heater to turn it on. Well, when your brain detects that your thyroid level is too low, it sends a signal from the brain to the thyroid to turn it back on, just like the thyroid. That's TSH. That's the signal. And so regular medicine, they assume that if your TSH is high, that your thyroid is low, right? Because there's a lot of signal being released and the thyroid's not keeping up. I've worked with so many people that have a normal TSH, but then their T4 or their T3 is low, or just the ranges. You know, the ranges, when you start really looking at labs, and I try to get into that in the book, is looking at, you know, teaching people and physicians how to interpret ranges. Is someone, let's just use a generic, like your normal T4 level is 1 to 3, right? And so anywhere between there is normal. Well, I'll test someone and their TSH is normal and their T4, in this example, let's say it's 1.01. So it's 0.01 points in the normal range. So most doctors will look at that and be like, oh, you're fine.
Yeah.
Well, how could that be normal if you have every symptom of low thyroid, right? So those ranges, I think sometimes they need to be looked at in the context of the person's symptoms, right? And we don't all feel the same at the same level of testosterone or estrogen or progesterone or thyroid. So I really like to work with people and look and explain to them the ranges. And I use some examples of patients I worked with and showing what we did and how we looked at that stuff. But that's just an example of thyroid and how, you know, easy the diagnosis is missed, and somehow, you know, how easy it can be to diagnose it properly just with using the right kind of testing.
Yeah. It's really common. And I will go over clients' pathology numbers a lot. And even what you said, just because you're within the range, we don't necessarily want you on the low end of the range and you're cold all the time and your hair's falling out. Like, with mid to higher end is usually ideal, but it's unfortunate that so many of these conventional practitioners, not all of them, but a lot of them, are still going by the old books.
Yeah.
And kind of not broadening the idea, well, why does this patient keep coming back even though I told them they don't have a problem, but they keep coming back? Well, then obviously there is a problem if they keep coming back. So it's just unfortunate the way it's been mismatched. The health industry is mismatched, in my opinion. It doesn't work with the symptom picture, like you said, and it doesn't work with the pathology. There's no, well, I suppose that's where functional medicine comes in, where you actually sit with the person and talk to them rather than even, I mean, yeah, I'm a health professional. I know if I'm going to my doctor, I'm only going there for a specific thing. I probably have 5 minutes with her. I'm obviously more educated than the average person. So I'm going in asking, well, I need this, and can you get me this? Like, I know. And that's me. And I have 5 minutes with her. People that have no idea what's going on, they're not getting a sit down. It's very different than in Europe. I don't know if you've been to Europe a lot. It's very different. In Ireland, my doctor, he knew everything about me. Like, he knew me. And then when I started having children, I was more comfortable transitioning to a female doctor. And she knew everything. They would ask my story. They would, in Ireland, you'll get allocated at least 30 minutes with your doctor, and she'd ask me, how is everything going? And like they really got to know you. But since I'm in Alberta now, and we've been here like 9 years, it really is wham bam, thank you, ma'am, like in out. And it's like shocking that for me, and I'm sure for other Europeans, it's like I'm not even bothered. What's the point? Just give me the requisition. Like it's disheartening to people. You can see where it is.
Yeah, it's there's greater problems in our healthcare systems. I mean, I just saw an article that they're more and more concerned about the rates of physician suicide, and because you go into medicine wanting to help people, right? And that's where my own personal belief, because most people that come to me usually hate their doctors. They don't have very nice things to say. But at the end of the day, I mean, most people that are doctors went into it to help people, but then you get stuck in the system where it's like you have these codes you constantly have to be putting in. If you don't meet a certain number of patients a day, there's not enough doctors. So then you're seeing twice as many patients as you should. I personally believe that like medical school and residency are just kind of like one long brainwashing by the pharmaceutical industry. I think it's like almost like a cult, basically, of like just telling you how to spew out medicines, and when one medicine doesn't work, and use the next one. That's why I started training in functional medicine. I was so intrigued. I was like, wait a minute, there's something else you can do for thyroid, or you can actually look at why someone got lupus. Like none of that was ever discussed.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, you have 50 patients to see today. These, if they keep coming back to you telling you they have a low thyroid, but their TSH is normal, here's the newest antidepressant, right? And when that antidepressant, when they come back saying that one's not working, then give them the second antidepressant, and we went through the whole opiate crisis, which is still really bad, but it was like, all right, well, you have pain here, take these opiates. And then all of a sudden one day, you're cut off from them, and now your body's physically addicted. So then you're on the street trying to get heroin. I can't tell you how many people I met in treatment or working with people in recovery that it's like, well, my doctor started me on pain pills because of a car accident, and next thing you know, I'm buying heroin on the street because my doctor won't prescribe the pain pills that they got me hooked on. So it's that's again, part of the reason I've written my 2 books is because sometimes also functional medicine doctors can be expensive. It can, it's not everybody can afford to see a functional medicine doctor. Well, I think my books are a very good explanation of what functional medicine is. And the feedback I got from the first book on gut health is either people got better just through reading it and following the steps, which is the same thing that'll happen with the hormones, or they're like, well, I just felt way more educated going into my doctor. I knew what tests, like you said, what tests to ask for. And then, it's hard for the doctor, but you also learn how to interpret them yourself and what to look for that a lot of times your doctor's overlooking. So that's one of the things I've tried to do, because there are so many things that someone can do on their own without needing a functional medicine doctor. Sometimes I'm very a believer in testing. So I like to do stool tests. I like to do SIBO tests and organic acids tests and candida and heavy metals and mold and glyphosate. And I really like to use testing, and that's a limit for, you do need a doctor usually for that. But there's just, I feel for the doctors and I feel for the patients, having been on both sides of it and seeing it. And, it's not, the current system, unfortunately, is really, really broken. And I'm just trying to do my part to help whoever I can. And by getting this information out there, that I've been very lucky to learn and help people with for a little over 10 years now.
You're right. It is broken in a heartbreaking way because it's affecting families. Like you mentioned, they'll keep prescribing. Oh, if this is not working, let's give you antidepressants. And unfortunately, someone in my family was prescribed benzodiazepines at a very young age, like 18. And then he became addicted. Yep. And then that wasn't strong enough. So then it was cocaine. And then it was alcohol. And unfortunately, that person now is only like 25 and an alcoholic. I mean, what a way to ruin someone's life. And I know it's not intentional, but it really, more people need to know, like you said, whoa, hold on, there is another way. There's a more natural way. And your book, the Good Health one, is great for that. I hope all of my followers get it because, like I said to you, I've been in the health industry for almost 15 years. And there was a couple of things in that, and I was like, oh, no way. I thought I knew it like a lot. And it was really like, and it was the most simple things, which again, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but like the bicarbonate of soda one was like, I knew to use bicarbonate of soda with some people, but when you said the belching thing, I was like, that's genius. That's so simple. It's non-invasive. People can do that at home.
Yep.
So that really was like something that simple that people, like you said, not everyone can afford to hire functional practitioners or naturopaths or even someone like myself. So to say to someone, hey, like get yourself a $2 bag of bicarbonate and this is what you can, I'd hate to say self-diagnose, but this is what you can learn from it. So like that was really awesome. And that leads us into the next thing about all these different pharmaceuticals and drugs and whatnot. People don't often talk about the impacts or the link between hormones and drugs, which technically are toxins. So can you discuss that a bit? What sort of toxins are we generally encountering that are going to affect our hormones? And even how are these pharmaceuticals that people think are helping them are affecting their hormones?
Yeah, in the introduction of the new book, Get the Funk Out, what I do is use my wife as an example, but her daily routine, and just to explain how many toxins you're exposed to just from doing your normal stuff, right? So the main ones when I talk about toxins that I test for are lead and mercury, like I said, mold, and then kind of all this other stuff. So an example is like, let's say you go to bed, right? And so that's when it starts. And sleep should be when you're detoxing, like you're basically your body, your immune system, everything in your liver are restoring while you sleep, right? But let's say you're sleeping and on the other side of the wall is your Wi-Fi router, right? And then they just put a 5G tower down the street next to all the electric lines that are right by your house, right? So then there's all these EMFs, right? Electromagnetic fields that are known cancer causing. Even the World Health Organization acknowledges that, but they're still putting it everywhere. So you're getting all these EMFs while you're sleeping. And then you've got mold in your house. So you're breathing in all these toxins, right? And then you wake up and breakfast is a smoothie, right? And so you have this smoothie and you're putting powders in there that are full of chemicals. You've got greens that are full of herbicides, pesticides, strawberries, all the stuff they spray on our food. And then you're playing with your dogs and the dog toys made of plastic and you're touching all that plastic. And then you're making water from your drinking water that has lead in it. And then you go outside to take a walk, but there's airplanes flying by. So you're breathing in more lead. And then you go shower and you're breathing in chlorine and other things in your shower water. And then you start putting on your makeup and all the chemicals that are going onto your face. So it's literally just a nonstop assault. All this stuff that they've created to make our lives easier, they never tested how all of it would affect our health, right? Like we have all this stuff that makes our lives more convenient, but also chronic disease and all these random diseases are skyrocketing, right? So, and they are really damaging our hormones. And that's why you're seeing so much of the low testosterone and estrogen dominance. But the most common, like when it comes to toxins, lead and mercury by far and away, I'd say are the most common ones that I find in people. The absorption of toxins starts before you're even born. So if mom is carrying a bunch of toxins, they cross the placenta. The placenta should be a place where you're transferring nutrients to the baby. Well, if your body's full of toxins, you're also transferring toxins, right? And then you're born via C-section, so you don't get a microbiome from a vaginal birth, and then they give you antibiotics. And then there's mercury in your baby food. You start eating fish, more mercury, then you get vaccinated, there's more mercury there. Lead, it was in the paint of walls, it's in pipes used to be made out of it. It's in just the air we breathe from airplane exhaust. So all this stuff is constantly coming in, right? And our bodies try to keep those toxins out. They try to keep it out through our skin is a barrier. Your gut should be a barrier. Your lungs should be a barrier. Then let's say you're smoking, you damage all of the alveoli in your lungs. So now you've lost the barrier of your lungs. Your gut is leaky because you've taken antibiotics, you've been eating lots of sugar and the standard processed diet. So now the toxins are flooding in through your gut as well. And then your skin is damaged because you're not sleeping enough and you're not getting enough nutrition. So the toxins get in through the skin. Luckily for us, when all that stuff crosses into our body, the bloodstream takes it to the liver. Right. So our liver is our main organ that everything goes to first. And our liver is known as kind of our main detox organ. All these toxins, whether I talk about glyphosate or lead or mold or mercury or the stuff that's in your sunscreen, they are fat soluble. So what that means is when we absorb them through our lungs, skin, etc., we will store them in our tissues. And that favorite place is the hormone glands. Well, what the liver does is go through a two-step process called phase 1 and phase 2, which makes the toxins water soluble. When they're water soluble, you can pee, poop, and sweat them out. That is how you detox. Your liver uses all these different nutrients, which I have some really cool photos and charts in the book that it describe what nutrients, how much of them you need, etc., for phase 1 and phase 2 of detox to work. So you need nutrients for that to work. We all have a limited ability of detox. What that means is, let's say in an average day, I can get rid of 100 toxins. And on an average day, I'm exposed to 50. So I'm fine. My body can detox.
So you can get rid of 100 for you in an optimal state with detoxification pathways that are working. So just want to elaborate that so people don't think, well, on average, the human body is 100. No. In a healthy body, it's 100.
Right. And let's say though, all of a sudden then like on the weekend, I'm binge drinking, I'm smoking cigarettes, and I'm living in a place that has mold, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm eating a bunch of fast food full of toxins. So now I'm being exposed to 1,000 toxins a day. And then it doesn't really matter what else I'm doing. My body can only get rid of 100. So 900 will get built up, and they will build and they will build. And eventually that will present as disease. And I think the hardest part about working with toxins or working with gut health is people don't get symptoms. So if you have a bunch of lead built up in your body, usually you're not going to have symptoms. Like it usually will present as high blood pressure or dementia or diabetes or Hashimoto's. So it's already kind of too late once you know that those toxins are too high. And that's where, to me, if I could just do one screening test for people, I would start heavy metal testing from the age of like 3. And I would do it every couple of years. And instead of most of the useless stuff that your regular doctor orders, that's what I would be doing. I would every year, every 3 years, I would be doing a stool test to look at your microbiome. And I would be doing toxin testing. I would look at glyphosate levels because that's the stuff that leads to disease. And the part that traditional doctors really struggle with is, let's say there's not a correlation with how high are your toxins compared to what is your disease. So using like a simple analogy, I could take someone with a lead level of 10 and they have autoimmune disease. I could take somebody with a lead level of 50 and they don't have anything yet. We're all very different, and different levels affect us differently. And that's where the whole point of functional medicine is to be very individualized. So you really need to talk to the person, compare talking to them and their history to their lab results. At the end of the day, no matter what they say, like the government, the EPA and all them, they put out normal levels of toxins. What is a normal level of glyphosate okay in our body? What is a normal level of lead okay in our body? The answer is 0. We shouldn't have any of that stuff in our bodies. There's just so much of it that they're trying to tell people it's okay and that this is a normal level. No, we weren't designed that way. Mm-hmm. And so that's a hard part is that, for most people, it presents too late. It's usually, I mean, my practice should be 99.9% preventative medicine. It should be, hey, I'm healthy. I have no symptoms at all. How do I stay healthy? 99.9 of my practice is I've been diagnosed with lupus. I've tried the first 3 drugs that the rheumatologist gave me. Now I'm out of options besides this drug that may kill me. And please save me and turn everything around in the next 2 weeks. And that's what the majority of my practice is. And I get it. Like, it's just like dealing with alcoholism. Like, you don't really ask for help till it's too late, right? Most of us, we won't change until we have to. And so that's why I'm seeing people that are desperate. They've gotten these horrible diagnoses, all these meds, and they're like, well, now I'm finally ready to clean up my diet. And, and that's the hard part. I mean, I get, change is not easy and most people don't want to do it, but for your listeners, like functional medicine, you should be getting started before you're sick. And, luckily we've been very lucky to have success with all types of different conditions and help reverse things. But at that point, it's a lot more difficult.
Yeah, the hole is deeper at that stage. I'm lucky. I do get a lot of people that will hire me because they're already healthy. Yeah. I mean, what they think is healthy and what I think is healthy is different, but generally they're in a good position and they just hire me to optimize what's going on and as a prophylactic or preventative measure. But then there's a lot of people is like, oh, well, I got this diagnosis. And I'm like, oh my God. So of course I'm going to help them, but it really is like, I wish you had came to me sooner, because now the hole is bigger and it's going to be harder to get out of. And this is my podcast, so I can say this, but sometimes I think not enough people really, really care about their health. They're not taking responsibility. And I'm known for being harsh with people, because I think being fluffy with people, you might agree or you might not agree, but being fluffy has not got us anywhere. We're sicker than ever, and people really need a wake-up call. Like, it's your health. Yes, I'm here to help you, but I can't live with you. I can't be there every minute. You have to take responsibility, but you have to take this seriously, because as health practitioners, we can speak to someone and we can see, oh shit, I know where this is going if they don't get a hold on this. But the person might not. They might be in the frame, oh, I just got diagnosed with diabetes, but they don't see the long term, that blindness, the gout, the kidney transplants. They don't see that, whereas we would. So we're like, oh no. But of course we're going to help everyone, but I really have said this loads, I don't think enough people take it serious enough.
Yeah, and because it's work, it's a lot of work, right? And
it's hard. It is hard, and I will always say that it's hard. But I wanted to ask you, as you were speaking, what's your opinion on aluminium, or you call it aluminium? Remember I was saying that?
Yeah. I haven't seen too much toxicity from it the way I see lead and mercury, cesium, thallium, but it's a heavy metal that if too much of can become a problem. And like a lot of us, a big way we're exposed is from our deodorant, that they put it in there. So when I do a heavy metal test, which is a urine test, we test aluminum levels. We test cesium, thallium, or uranium, all these different lead, mercury. So we test for it. I don't see it come back that frequently. Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. I was going to say the reason I asked is because a client this morning showed me her new water bottle. And normally I will encourage people to drink out of glass or
Yeah.
ceramic or stainless steel. Like that's my thing. I know it's a lot of people's thing, but there's a new trend here of this new water in Alberta that comes in an aluminium bottle. And I was like, well, hold on, let me think about that. I was like, I don't know if that would be reusable. And she turned it around, and on the back it said like BPA reusable. And I said, okay, well, she only bought it today, so I don't see any harm in drinking the water that's in it today. Although I will say you buy it like that full of water. So that has me thinking, how long is that water sitting in that?
Right.
But
And
I said to her, I'm just like, drink it, but let me consider the whole aluminium reusable thing. So that just popped up. Now I can get your opinion. Would you say
I'm
drink
with
it?
you. No, I would get rid of that.
Yeah,
I,
like
I
I hate to
like
break
what you
people's
said.
yeah, I hate to break people's hearts, but this is a thing now. It's on the shelves in Alberta
Yeah.
and it says on the back reusable. If it was stainless steel, okay. But
Right.
there is here we have a kombucha in Alberta, and the cap is aluminium, and after a while the cap will start to go black and it'll leave a black mark around your mouth if you reuse that bottle, because that toxin is coming off onto the top of it. Then you put your mouth on it and then your lips have black. And but yeah, people don't notice there's a lot of marketing for health stuff that's not healthy. Like,
Right. Yeah, that I think that's the part that kind of gets me the most upset, is a lot of people are doing their best, right? You're buying something that you think is good for you, and it's just, more money, more power for the people that kind of control the politicians. And it's really kind of, to me, infuriating that's why I've written again my books, is because there is so much of this stuff that's thrown at us as like healthy, and it's not. And I feel bad for people because that's what most people are getting their information from, is the news or companies that are making tons of money off of this. So there's not like, you have to really do the work, or work with someone like you that does the digging, that can help you filter out like, hey, is this just another marketing scam, somebody else getting rich off of me? It's really, it really kind of makes me mad that we're being exposed to all of that.
it
And
is,
most of the time they're being dishonest.
and it is marketing, because I've always said specific colors make people think something is clean or healthy. You've got blues, whites, greens, yellows. Oh, look, these are healthy colors, if that's a thing. But it is. So this bottle is like blue, which transitions into white. It's very appealing. This
Right.
looks like a clean bottle. This couldn't be bad for me. All the like, that's where the trickery is. It annoys me too, because I feel bad that she spent the money, but I can't let it slide. I have to tell
Yeah,
her.
you have to. I mean,
So
I'm like you, where I've always been very blunt. I always kind of thought it came from my Eastern European parents.
maybe.
But I've always kind of told it how it is. And some, I usually, I don't really care if I'm offending the person I'm working with, if they're taking it personally. Like, at the end of the day, like, they're working with me to try to get better. So I always try to be as honest as I can be, whether I think it's going to hurt someone's feelings or not. Um, so I agree with you. If you see something like that, then that's your job, right? To help people filter that stuff out. Because, I look back at growing up in being a first generation American, and so badly wanting to fit in. And I just got sucked into all the marketing.
Yeah.
It's
And
sick.
that's all it is. Yeah.
One of I think a crazy one is Lunchables. I don't know if you
Yeah,
remember that.
we
I think
have
they're
them.
still, yeah, I think they're still out. And it's like, I read this, I forget, it was some kind of health book, but talked about how genius the marketing was behind Lunchables, because it was like convincing 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds that like, you're going to be a big boy or a big girl and you can make your own lunch. And it's like, it's sick. Like, they're getting at little children to market, like, and I was convinced. I like wanted, my parents were trying to give me healthy, real food, and I'm like, please give me Lunchables. So I'm like cool like the rest of the
Yeah.
kids.
But then you look at it and parents are like, oh, well, that's cheese. That's healthy. That's barely cheese.
That's not
This
cheese.
is ham. They're getting their protein. It's like as well the whole Lucky Charms thing. Just because you eat Lucky Charms doesn't mean you're going to find a pot of gold or become Irish. Like, you're not. It's everywhere. It is laughable though. Is like, come on. But I mean, I suppose if it wasn't like that, me and you wouldn't have a job. So.
Right.
But so what we've established so far is that our hormones are impacted by everything. Sleep, stress, everything. But the one overlooked thing that is relevant in your book is toxins. Will directly impact our hormones on pretty much every level.
Absolutely. Hormone imbalances, I'm finding them in just about everybody. And like I said, I had low testosterone. When I started digging, I found really high levels of lead, and there was no reason for me to have high levels of lead besides being alive in 2022. Like that's just everywhere. So I think it's an area that is not like, I like that you like to keep things simple. That's what I like to do. So my books are very, very like simple, easy to read. I think we sometimes make it too complicated. But I really try to get the information out there of, what tests to ask your doctor for. Like, if it's not low thyroid, is it just estrogen dominance or is it cortisol? So all that stuff is explained. And kind of the last part, what we're talking about, the last chapter is all the stuff you can do around your house. So what kind of cookware to use, what kind of sunscreen to use, how to figure out what is your cleaning products, what to use in your garden. So all that stuff is kind of gone over in the last chapter of like how to just clean up your day-to-day environment. But at the end of the day, I also think that the biggest thing that people are missing besides the toxin component is the stress component. And when your cortisol is raging through the roof morning to night, you're not restoring at night, and really with this constant onslaught that we're getting from eating, breathing, drinking, we really need good sleep and rest to restore our liver, to restore our gut, to get ready for the next day. And so I always to me, that's always whether we're talking about gut health or detox or balancing your hormones, at the end of the day, to me, the most important part of all of it is your mental, emotional, and spiritual health.
So if I don't ask this, my clients will forsaken me. So I have to ask as we start to wrap up. So toxins are going to affect your hormones, but that's going to affect your sex hormones and thus your libido and your desire to even want to be intimate. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
Low libido is a big thing I see now, and it would be helpful if you would reinforce what I say. I say, well, look, if you're stressed all day, you're just burnt out, the last thing you're going to have or want to do is be intimate or have any sort of libido at all.
For me, the way I approach it with my patients is there's two things that it's going to be. For a man, it's either going to be low testosterone or high cortisol, right? That it's going to be a low testosterone problem or a cortisol problem. For women, it's going to be an estrogen progesterone imbalance or cortisol. Everybody wants to start, let's use just a man, for example, with testosterone. Well, if you just put me on testosterone, my sex drive is going to go through the roof. I can't tell you how many men I've seen go on testosterone and it doesn't help their sex drive. And there's only one reason for that. It's cortisol. Right. Stress. Same with a woman when we get their estrogen progesterone balanced, I can't tell you how many women I've seen where they're like, my sex drive is amazing now. It's back to normal. Or the man that it's like, hey, like I just had a guy yesterday, the day before in his 50s or 60s that was low T. And I think he had a very high functioning, stressful job. And I was like, let's try the testosterone. If that's not working, there's going to be one answer left for you. We followed up. He's been on testosterone for only a month and his sex drive is back to normal. So stress is not an issue. And he had been telling me that stress was not that big of a problem. I never believe anybody when they tell me that. So
Mm,
he proved me wrong, which is great. I love that.
yeah.
But usually to me with libido, yeah, that's usually, if it's not a reproductive hormone imbalance, usually it's a cortisol imbalance, which is the worst kind to have, because that takes the real deep down work to figure out the why.
So can I give you a scenario before we finish and just get
Sure.
some feedback? So for a woman whose nutrition is on point, her body
Uh-huh.
weight is perfect, blood sugars are great, her menstrual cycle is good.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't sleep great the majority of the time because she's a toddler who comes in and out. But when the toddler sleeps, she sleeps. So it's kind of like not even 50-50, like 60-40 or something. So she's probably awake more than asleep. But she has a lot of stress. Like husband works away, dealing with the toddler by herself, working too. Now they're looking at moving. So in that sense, where this is such a hard scenario, even where you would say, well, it's stress, but what can you do about stress at that stage? Like, what kind of advice would you give to someone like that?
I've recommended every patient I've ever worked with to work with a therapist while they're working with me, and having someone that's trained in mental health to run that by, all those issues by, because that sounds like a lot, but that's, a lot of people are dealing with a lot of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And um it goes deep. Like a lot of times it goes back to figuring out what happened when you were a kid. And it, the way it was described to me when I was going through treatment is like peeling back the layers of the onions. I mean, the obvious stuff of like, oh my God, we're going to move. There's a toddler, you're not working out. I mean, that stuff is easy, but it's usually goes deeper than that. So I really like working with a therapist to get into the, what started all of this. And starting, figuring out what meditation practice works, what's the right exercise regimen. And with that, I mean, it also involves the couple together, because it's not just the woman, right? The man is playing a role in why the sex drive is low too. So
Yeah.
it really takes a commitment from the couple as a team, I think, to really work together. And there's some supplements you can use, but I personally hate using supplements for that kind of stuff, because it's like, that's a band-aid approach. You're taking a supplement for libido is not going to make a huge difference if you don't actually deal with what's going on with your husband and with stress and all of that. So it's not an easy thing, but it's an everyday, that's the kind of stories I hear every day. And I do see people, I've just seen it over and over the years of, to me, all the functional medicine stuff is easy. Like I can test you for heavy metals. I can test you for mold and glyphosate and dysbiosis and SIBO and all these things. It's easy to treat, in my opinion. The only thing that gets in the way is the mental, emotional, spiritual part,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
And that's the part that, a lot of people just don't want to deal with. And that's where I'm pretty blunt. I'm like, you could keep following the perfect diet and taking 10 supplements a day, but I really don't think you're going to get anywhere with your health.
Yeah, yeah. That is some great advice. That is the whole mindset. Are you emotionally ready? Like the whole sort of stuff. So the last thing I only noticed when you turned your head, there's a bear behind you, which is holding your books, which my people will love because Alberta's full of bears, of course. I was like, what is that balancing on? So it's a bear. So
Yeah,
I need to
that's
ask.
Wilson the bear.
So I need to ask.
We,
Mhm.
go ahead.
Where did you come up with the names? They're quite entertaining, the names of your books. Like, why did you do that and not some generic, boring, fix your hormones with detox kind of thing?
Yeah. So the bear, we live more than half the time in Montana when the pandemic started. So we're actually in Bozeman, and we split time between Bozeman and Chicago.
Okay.
So that's where the bear came from. We got really into bears living here.
Yeah.
So Wilson, he's holding both my books. The name, Am I allowed to cuss or no?
Oh yeah, we're
Okay.
Irish. Yeah.
So a friend of mine, when I was writing my book, he came up with unfuck your gut, which there's a lot of books that use the F word now. And,
Yeah.
there's a few really famous ones.
Mm.
And my publisher kind of talked me out of it. She was like, you're writing a health book, so I don't think you should use that word. And so then I really liked the title. I was really sad to get rid of it. And this is with the first book. And I used to have a saying in my practice that we had even t-shirts that said, we put the funk in functional medicine. So both books are, it's unfunk your gut and get the funk out. It's FUNC for, so funk for functional medicine. So I took a title that my friend gave me that I really liked and made it more appropriate. And it kind of worked with the funk and functional medicine. And get the funk out. I actually came up with that one on my own. I was pretty excited about that. I feel like it fits because, it's functional medicine and most of us have quite a bit of funk in there.
Yeah, so it's like toxins, get the funk out. Yeah. I had to ask. I was like, that's quite, and no, from the other podcasts I listened to, nobody had asked that. So
yeah. I think it's a unique title. I'm happy with it. I'm glad it's appropriate.
It also makes it all less serious. Even though it's serious, it makes it less serious and more approachable to people. You don't have to be a doctor. We all know what funk means. I hope we do. So yeah, definitely. This has been a pleasure. I know I've kept you a little bit longer. So your book comes out in October.
It does.
Hopefully we can arrange another time to go into the gut stuff. Obviously, that's big. Where else can we find you and even look at what you're putting out there in the health world of information, which is huge?
Yeah. So my website's the best way if people have questions for me or want to get a hold of me or want a link to get the books is doc-koz.com, doc-koz.com. Dr Koz. That's also my Instagram name. I'm really bad at social media. I don't really put a lot out there. Usually it's more just like fun stuff that I do with my wife or dogs. But I do share all my podcasts and things I do. But I really like, I spent my career staying off of social media and just focusing on learning to be a good doctor. And now, once I feel like I had enough experience, I put these books out there. So I think there's more in these books that most people will find on their favorite social media doctor or whoever. I really try to put the high yield stuff from a medical perspective, from someone that's worked with it for a number of years now. So that's where I would recommend starting, is for sure. And if you think you're more gut and diet issues, or you think you're more hormone and toxin, all of us should look at all of it. But my website, very easy to get a hold of us through that, or social media. The best ways to get a hold of us.
Great. I will put the links below. I know we can get the Unfunk Your Gut on Amazon here. I'm sure your other one will come on Amazon. Yeah. And then I'll have a look at our chapters in Indigo and let people know if they can get it, because they're really, dare I say, they're cool books. They're straight to the point. They refine it. And you're right. Like, not being on social media is a skill in itself. You should be applauded. But the thing with social media, and I know this about me too, is we keep putting out information, but too much confuses people. So your books will refine that. So thank you for the books. Thank you for talking to me. And we will hopefully get back together soon to talk about the gut stuff.
Sounds great.
All right. Thank you for joining me.
My pleasure.
And have a good day.
You too.